Hello everyone, I'm Mac at Carter&Holmes Orchids. This is Mikey and we're here to answer your questions. Most orchids sold today should not be hard to grow. You need a bright sunny window, and if you can follow a few basic rules about watering and fertilizing, you can be successful with a wide variety of orchids. The most common reason why healthy, mature orchids don't rebloom consistently is because they're not getting enough light. Orchids are not low light plants. They need good bright light. Phalaenopsis, many oncidiums, a lot of lady slippers need African violet conditions or better. If you've got lighting where African violets will bloom well, most of those orchids should too. Now there are other common reasons why healthy mature orchids don't rebloom consistently. One is too much fertilizer or too much nitrogen in the fertilizer. Let's see, the third reason would be repotting. Most orchids need to be repotted into fresh mix at least once every 2 to 3 years. You're not repotting them to put them in larger pots. You're repotting them to replace the old souring, decomposing mix with fresh mix. And if you don't, eventually they're not going to bloom consistently and they're not going to be healthy. The best way to kill orchids is by overwatering. Absolutely. Most of the orchids that are for sale today, readily available, are epiphytic plants that grow attached to trees in nature with the roots exposed. They're watered by rainfall, they dry out almost immediately, and then they get watered again. The roots have to have access to air between waterings. If they don't, because they're being watered too frequently, or because they're sitting in saucers of water and there's a wicking action, or because they're placed in a pot that's too big with lots of media around the roots and they're staying wet, the roots start to rot off. As they do, the plant can't get as much water as it needs through the remaining root system, so it starts pulling water out of its leaves. They wilt, get wrinkled, go limp. People see that and they think this plant's not getting enough water. They water it even more and kill it. So you have to learn how to water your orchid properly. Water on a wet-dry cycle. Don't overpot your orchid, and don't let it sit in water. We should all save our ice cubes for adult beverages and drink responsibly. But seriously, there is a grain of truth in the just add ice marketing gimmick. People tend to kill their orchids from overwatering. And if you just give your plants 2 or 3 ice cubes or 3 or 4 ice cubes once a week, you're not going to overwater them. You're probably not giving them enough water. But you're also doing possible damage to the root systems of the plant. Don't measure the amount of water that you put on them. Water them thoroughly, allow them to drain, allow them to dry out, and then water them again. There's not one right way to fertilize orchids. You need to fertilize them in a way that you can remember to do consistently. In nature, they're fertilized every time the rainwater filters through leaves or organic matter around the roots, so they get a very light dose of fertilizer year-round. At home, you may want to fertilize once a month. Circle a day on the calendar, and the next time you water first, then fertilize. Or you may want to fertilize every other watering. The more frequently you fertilize, the weaker you mix the fertilizer. Once a month, maybe half a teaspoon to a teaspoon per gallon of water of most water-soluble fertilizers that you would buy. Every other watering, a quarter of a teaspoon to a half a teaspoon per gallon of water. Remember that no matter how often you choose to fertilize, you should always err on the side of less fertilizer. Plants use fertilizer, the nitrogen in fertilizer, to process sunlight into food through photosynthesis. The less light the plant gets, the less fertilizer it can use. So, always err on the side of less fertilizer if you're not sure how much to use. If you use too much fertilizer, you can burn your roots. Fertilizer salts can build up and damage the root system. The plant can turn dark green and stop blooming consistently. There's no harm from using too little, so always err on the side of less.